ついに始まりました僕はこれです。もう一つシュワッと誰か抜いてくね。おい小さいなんでもするからおつけろ。はよ助け舟求めてけど人影たゆそれにこの集大さらす心の準備がガン見されてる恥ずかしが穴があったら入りでだがついにトライしぜこのチャンス今こそ伝えるべし。じゃが今度しょってからちはチョックせはとしんごぶりかさんだおったおせおっけおって
ダメです
はおったおせおっけおって
ダメです
もうこっち一体抜けんのじゃもっとみっと早くついてでもともう一つシュワッポ誰か抜いてくね。おい小さいなんでもするからおつけろ。お腹満たしたいで
ダメです
お風呂入りたいで
ダメです
お花摘みたいで私の人生も
ダメです
皆さん今までありがとうございました。おにぎりではたしんごぶりかさんだおったおせおっけおって
ダメです
はおったおせおっけおって
ダメです
もうこっち一体抜けんのじゃもっとみっと早くついてでもともう一つシュワッポ誰か抜いてくね。おい小さいなんでもするからおつけろ。誰か抜いてくれ。What?
Extra eel sauce.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, 7-piece salmon sushi, a 7-piece seared salmon sushi. Okay, crazy salmon roll.
743.
This is so heavy. Oh God, look at that. Oh my God.
They actually did it, a legendary weasel in an all-new style of meme deck. The infamous Cruel Claw seems like a pretty solid value piece because when it hits a player, then you exile until you hit a non-land and you can cast it by just discarding a card. But, as many of you realized very quickly, if you only have a single spell in the entire deck, then you're guaranteed to hit it. Now yes, you could make that single spell in your deck Ulamog or Blightsteel Colossus, but that's not what this is about. You could make your one spell Ward of Bones, making sure to play lands that sacrifice themselves so that nobody can play anything while you slowly beat them to death with a weasel. You could make your one spell Phage the Untouchable and send a message by forcing yourself to lose the game immediately because you didn't cast it from your hand. But the one true meme is 98 lands in a World Fire, because you leave all players with nothing, but you make sure that your lands can deal damage so that you can squeak out a win. And one final tip, as long as your single silly spell is odd, you can run Obosh, and I think it's odd if you haven't liked and subscribed. They actually did it. A legendary
ついに始まりました。僕はこれです。がおや手札を次くそうの次のターンで私が勝ち負けでその過去さの秘訣を教えてちょよしちゃねえかっこ悪く抜けちゃダメほら頑張れ頑張れ本気出したら勝てるんでしょ早く見せて自我ちゃんの自由地にそうずかこちこしこやさいはずっと知る口なしじゃけな家ん超えてさあもう超えてすんば今メディアされどその場しのにはじゃけな家ん超えてさあもう超えてすんばゲームセット会議向かったナイストライ猫33対4猫負けちゃおう負けちゃおうねえ常に生き勝ち探しちゃおう出せ出せ出せ出せ敗北宣言ぶちまけろ
Hey, Bob. Hi, Bobtron. Hi, Chucky. Bum ba da do 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 bum bum. kidding me? You said it, Bugs. Balatro is not a game. It's just ruining my life. Balatro is my ex-girlfriend. Yeah, they're like, we're gonna take Fortnite Crew. We're gonna get rid of Fortnite Crew. No, we're gonna give you Fortnite Crew for an extra $10 on your Game Pass Ultimate. Like, if I wasn't playing Game Pass games on both my computer and on, I see, I'm skipping so many frames! I hate my life. Thought there was a new Barbarian app, turned out to be merch. I'm not gonna hate on that, but I mean, for them to just throw out a video when they do for them to throw out videos and be like, hey, it's just merch. They should probably be like, merch episode, merch video, merch promo, or Daggerfall? What's that? Elder Scrolls Daggerfall? You gotta be fucking kidding me!
recurring interaction this week. Hey, are you playing Borderlands 4? Someone asks. Yes, I am, I replied. How's it running for you? Question. Like complete dog shit since you ask, I replied, and then a tangible sense of relief washes over us both. Phew, we don't need to buy a new graphics card or upgrade our drivers, or dig the worms out of our eyeballs that make me look like the frame rates dropping like your using spunk with your mum's movie glasses. The game's just optimised for shit. And then a strange solidarity develops between us as we light-heartedly swap stories about our favourite bugs, and speculate on which specific parts of the game suffered the most from the impacts of random pitch for 12 and swinging cadence. The only thing that should be crashing to desktop this much is an office working with narcolepsy, and when a video game world has bottomless pit hazards, it would be useful if the devs could remember to put kill boxes in those bottomless pits, so I don't find myself floating in with void under the map, kicking my little legs trying to bounce a grenade off the invisible wall in the hopes of ending my farce of a life. But yeah, Borderlands 4, bored of this bland snore, if you will. The latest installment of Gearbox's signature sci-fi FPS franchise that offers an idiosyncratic four-pronged experience: shooting, looting, hooting, and tooting. Hooting meaning lots of very facetious quippy dialogue between rapping characters, and tooting meaning me reacting to all of said dialogue like it's a great big fart in my face. Actually, Borderlands 4 seems to lean slightly away from the wacky quippy thing, compared to Borderlands 3 at least. It's still got a lot of quipping, it's still occupying some blasted comedy no man's land, but it's fucking Borderlands. You can't expect less. That would be like expecting a band from California to write a song that isn't about California for once. Having leaned slightly away from something, one might question what Borderlands 4 leans into instead, and the answer is nothing. It sort of sticks straight up now like a confused hand putting a into a classroom. See, I didn't want to dwell on the bugs and the shitty optimization because, as ever, that shit could hypothetically be fixed in post with some intensive patching and maybe finally getting around to random pitch that's dick rules over it. But when a game's on the high end of tech requirements, there's this tacit understanding that this is the price of living on the cutting edge of hot new games. And if Borderlands 4 is the cutting edge, it's going to result in a very disappointing birthday cake experience. Well, the frosting is going to get squeezed out the sides. Even while I'm hearing my computer fan roaring like a sustained scream of the kamikaze pilot, Borderlands 4 isn't doing much to show off the excessive power usage. Does it look nice? I guess. Not especially. Usual art style that is like Fallout Vikings art on the Mad Max Saturday morning cartoon. Does it have tons of exciting new features? It's got a contextual grappling hook. Hook being precisely the wrong word. You know what's depressing is that there was a time when this might have shivered me nads, but frankly Just Cause 2 pretty much did everything I wanted done with grappling hooks. That was 15 Ferrero Rocher scoffing years ago. I suppose Borderlands 4 feels kind of new for a Borderlands game. Unfortunately, it would also feel very, very old for a Far Cry game. Is this all we are now, AAA games? The same toy box every few months with the content slightly rearranged? Things haven't been the same since you sanded down Lara Croft's hits. It starts out the usual Borderlands experience, pick one of 4 colourful loudmouth mercenaries and used by an opening music video like Guy Ritchie got hired to adapt Masters of the Universe. But then the cast are imprisoned in a big seamless open world by a high-class villain who thinks we've got nothing better to do all day than listen to him gab off about the futility of our struggle in the face of his perfection, which is where the Far Cry comparison begins, although they seem to have forgotten the charismatic and competent parts of the standard Far Cry villain template. The world is divided between 3 areas. One of them is grassy, one of them is deserty, and the other one's snowy, obviously. What, you think your money warrants more creativity than that, you lowly worm? And of course each one is governed by one of the main villain's lead henchmen. One of them is the tough one of them is the smart one, and one of them is the mad one. Hey, it was the same deal with the 3 gods in Eternal Darkness, wasn't it? Boy, that was an interesting game. Let's dwell on those happier times for a moment. Of the 3 sub-bosses, 2 are actively working against the main villain, and the 3rd is so incompetent the big villain basically cheers you on while you're doing him in. Hey, thanks for reducing my Christmas present budget, and incidentally, you will never defeat me wahaha. So after I did defeat him in the big story climax after a short 2-phase exchange in which he decided to bring slow-moving triangle lasers to a gunfight, I said aloud, boy, from the way you were going on, I really thought that would be harder. Props for self-esteem, I guess. I should switch to your therapist. But I wasn't stupid. We still hadn't had a boss fight with the other dude who showed up as a surprise villain not long earlier, who demonstrated incredible combat skills. So after skipping the credits roll, I was returned to gameplay in front of a big portal with the game going, hey, just walk through this door, nothing sus. And of course we get pulled into the cosmic realm where we fight the real final boss in space, as they subject us to all the nightmarish horrors of their only rivalry. Man, some of the random shootouts earlier were harder than this. It's almost like most of the challenge in a shooter comes from finding cover and prioritising targets, and therefore if there's only one dude shooting at you and for you to shoot at, you can just hold the mouse pointer over them and wait for them to stop moving. Was that really what this was all leading up to, game? Oh, I couldn't possibly comment. Anyway, now story mode's over, let me walk you through all the ways you're going to be grinding to make numbers go up for the rest of your fucking life. How about piss off, Borderlands 4? I'm mad now. It's not just dreary, it's fucking insolent to expect people to buy top-of-the-line hardware to play the same repetitive dribble as always. Nothing in Borderlands 4 stands out as a must-see moment or unique selling point. The most that could be said is that it once again presents lots of wonderful opportunities to shoot Jason Voorhees in a scrapyard, as well as shoot Jason Voorhees' dog in the field behind the scrapyard. And if you ask nicely, also some robots in the decommissioned Amazon warehouse that the City Authority will shortly be rezoning as a scrapyard. And you can recreate the experience playing basically any other Borderlands game, or alternatively, another repetitive shooting game entirely. anyway, as long as we spend the whole time listening to a looping tape of Golden Suited Improv Comedy Night hosted by professional wrestlers.
I thought it said 100% off. I was like, there's no way that this game is going to be free.
Three unwritten rules in Japan that you don't want to miss. Correctness is often seen as immature or confrontational in Japan. As a result, a sophisticated system of indirect communication has evolved. First, in Japan, a direct no is rare. Instead, you'll hear things like, "I'll consider it positively." That polite line often means a soft rejection. While this sounds optimistic, it is a classic example of public facade used to avoid conflict. Second, if you're first into an empty elevator, you have implicitly been assigned the role of elevator captain. Hold the open button, ask floors, press buttons for others, and be the last to leave. A tiny ritual showing thoughtfulness for the group. Third, when offered a gift, politely refuse once or twice like, "Oh, you shouldn't have." That's not rejection, but modesty. The giver will insist, and after the little ritual, you accept graciously.
This is how people get punched in the face.
We're getting a brand new festival in the bar for MadCon Vegas 2025, which is to order even if you're not going to the con. So let's break down everything inside. It has an assortment of fun cards, but like all of the great people, Mr. Boss is only for industry. A really fun set to open with the best ones like credit cards, and alcohol cards. The most expensive one in the set right now is for the Urza. It's got $70 with the 2 for the Alpha, which is $3. On top of this, we use the 2 but also get some oils. It has Norway, whose base copy goes for $2.71. There's also a Visa, which goes for 50 cents. On top of that, there's Old Road, which goes for $25.50. And finally, there's Zippos, which goes for $2.36. However, on top of this, each layer you also get promos. And essentially, when you playtest cards, they get to race you Dragon, whose base copy goes for $18.99. And Crystal Prince over time, whose base copy goes for $19.73. We're getting a brand new festival.
A point-based. So they're not doing the. Oh, like you know how they do the restrictions for They do restrict 1, restrict 2 for Duel Links, where like these are limit 1. You can only have 1 from this card pool, and you can only have no more than a combination of 2 from limit 2s. Is it like that, or? So your deck is built based on card points. Hold on, let me look this up. New Yu-Gi-Oh format. What's MBT? Oh no, my
And all right. Well, I must say,
I thought that Jesse.
thank you for the sub. I must say that was incredibly underwhelming. Brogo's made a video on it already. Yeah, but it came out 10 minutes ago. So if he made a video on it already, then he had information early from them, right? Which obviously he's sponsored by them. I don't like that Konami does that. Anyways, whatever. All right, the Genesis rules are simple. No Link monsters or Pendulum monsters. Oh, wait, what? Are allowed? Bro, are we on DB unrated? All other cards are allowed. The original field layout is used, so no extra monster zone nor Pendulum zones. The standard Forbidden Limitless card is not used. All those cards can be used except Links and Pendulums. Usual limit of 3 copies per deck. Deck construction uses a point system. Some cards are assigned a point value. Most cards cost 0. The total point cost of your main deck, extra deck, and side deck cannot exceed the point cap. The standard point cap is 100, but events can be run with any point cap, or even a 0 point cap. OTS stores can set their own caps for tournaments. Oh, so, okay. That's just another deck building restriction, but no Pendulum and Links. So you can create a deck list here on a points tabulator tool. Build your Genesis deck on the My Deck List page. Okay, that's interesting. And then go here to read up info and strategy for Genesis, where and how to play and how to build. Okay, where do you play? Is this going to be actually supported as OTS only? Genesis Invitationals will win an original Dark End Dragon prize card and giant cards like Potter. What is happening? Hold on. So this is the rule. It's designed for everyone, mostly meant as a big tent to provide a good and fun hand. Okay, yeah. Looking for less complicated game. Looking for less complicated game involving bound cards doesn't make sense to me. Everyone who just can't get enough dueling. Yeah, okay. So we're going to be in early access for a bit. During early access, we'll have a browser-based deck builder site to build your deck list. Have a count up your points, make sure deck is legal, and download a copy to print out and take to a tournament. OTSs can run officially sanctioned Genesis events starting today. After a couple weeks, we'll start running Genesis invitational events and major events like YCSs. Multiple 16-player mini tournaments will run on Saturday. The first and second finishers in each of those get to play the main invitation held on a Sunday. We've dug into the vault for some special prize to hand out, like at SJC at Dark End Dragon. Okay, so you have to not play the main event if you want to do this.
I thought that Jesse was cooked.
It is being officially supported, but it's like it's parallel to the YCS at the same event, but you can only play in one of them. But they are going to be events for this. And I don't know if this is not going to be in Europe at all, or... Oh, it's of Bologna. Okay, sure. Noir, thanks so much for the sub. Appreciate it. Keep reading. All right, I'm keeping reading. Merida, Mexico, Pennsylvania, Bologna. For the first North American full-on Genesis YCS is coming in 2026. Oh my god, wait. Is this a good thing? I don't know if Magic was good when it had Modern, Standard, and all that. Multiple formats can be good. I'm not sure if this is it. I'm curious. I will read more about it. We're going to talk about Genesis today and how in the days to come with multiple articles here every day, so stay tuned. Okay. I'm curious how much shit costs. There's a long fucking list here, so let's go through this. Abyss Dweller, 100 points. So if you only have a 100 point cap, if you play Abyss Dweller, this is the only card worth points you're allowed to play. Dragite is 20. Why would I even play 20 points for Dragite? Agido is 50. Okay. Albion is 33. Allure Darkness is 5. You have to pay for Allure. 104 or more factor pain. No one is doing that. Ancient Gear Advance 33. Ancient Gear Statue 33. What is this list? Band played on 100. Are all the floodgates worth 100? Thank fucking God. Angel of 7 is 100. Okay, Appointed Red Lotus is 50, sure. Orihime 33. It's almost like they know how to fix Yu-Gi-Oh! They don't do anything about it. All the FTK cards, 100. Christia, 100. Escados, 100. Protoss, 100. Why don't they apply this to the modern game? Scythe, 100. Asceticism, 10. Why is that even on this list? Ash Blossom, 15. That's... I don't like hand traps being points, but okay. Assault Synchron 5, Astral Karibo 3. Why? Why is Astral Karibo on this list? Atlantean Dragoons 40, Ilya Silva 20. How many cards is on this list? Mew 33, Baron 85, 81 for Bahamut Drake. What a random number, 81. Is Toad like 20 or something? And now this is like not allowed. Barry Statue's all 60. Okay, Beatrice is 100. Boo. Big Welcome is 33. Okay. Cartesia is 3. Okay. Bonfire is 40. Oh, that's Block Dragon. Bonfire is 40. Block Dragon for 40 is not bad. Branded Fusion is 33. Branded Expulsion is 33. Branded Lost is 66. Why is this more than Branded Fusion? Branded is probably not playable. Baldrake 30, Druid Worm 30, Magnamut 33. What's 1? Butterfly Dagger Elma. Great. Very useful. Catapult Turtle 100. Called by the Grave 20. I feel like that should be higher. Change of Heart 10. What is this? Centurion Primaris 5 and Trudeas 3. Okay. Who did all the testing for this? Contact C100 is funny. Chaos Ruler. How much is Chaos Ruler? 50 points for Chaos Ruler. That's not bad. I may be using that at some point. All the Crystron ships on here too. Wait. Oh, the Dracotel cards are here. I'm like, wait, just play the new cards and you just like win. All right, Cyberjar is 33. Why did he? Cyberjar's not good, man. This card could be so much lower. Cyberstein 27. Kaliuga 77. Why not just make it 100, man? Caesar's 20. Okay.
I feel like Cyberjar is up there because people can abuse Book of Moon and Book of whatever. What's the one that allows you to flip face up? Be like, just blow everything up and set up everything. Oh, look, oh no, oh my god, no way.
Emerald is 1. Why? All the dangers are 3. That's lame. Except for Nessie's 7 and Jack of the Snooker 7. Oh, that's lame. Deception 33. Yeah, the Asmina cards are incredibly expensive. 100 deck lockdown, good. 100 for Bell Duo.
I thought that Jesse was
But this card does not need to be 100. Greg, you got the sub. Appreciate you. DPE is 20. Plasma is 20. Okay, I don't know if DPE needs 20. All random stuff here. 45 for Dimension Fusion. That one could be kind of cool. Dimension Shifter 5. Oh, that's cancer. What? Why? Why are all the floodgates at 100 and then shifters at...
I think that's a good idea too. To just say that, like, we're not going to ban cards, but if you use particular cards, you're not going to be able to have any other the good, really, really good stuff in your deck. I feel like normal monsters... Like, I feel like the only things that should have restrictions are monsters with effects. And then give bonuses to Gemini monsters. Gemini monsters are negative points. If the card is absolute dog shit, it gets negative points.
5? Oh my god. Don't send me back to this hell. Not again. Oh my god. Why? 5! That's fucking nothing! Dynamorphia Intact 1. So random. Rex Turn 91. Okay. Zeus is 20, that's expensive. Diviner is 33. Gen 100, great. Impulse is 30 and Purge is 10. Alright. So the Dracotales are all, okay, they all add up. Dragon Master Imagine 100. Why? That's not relevant at all. Dragon's Mind 100, sure. Roll is 7. Dude, Ash should not be more expensive than these cards. That's so lame. Eclipse Woman. 33.
I guarantee they'll update the list every month based on how often cards are being used. If the 100s are less used, well, I feel like the 100s, there shouldn't be any single card that has like 100. Well, they said that they weren't having pendulums in this format. Pendulums and links are completely restricted. So there's no Crystron, Helki Fibrax, and all that other fancy stuff. There's no IP mask. There's no well, they do have XCs and fusions and synchros.
That's pretty good. That card is very strong. But imagine, you need Guard Dragons to be really good. Effect layer 7, okay. Wind is 100? Nope, it's 60. Great, alright.
I thought that Jesse was cooked.
Grotty, thank you so much for the sub, appreciate it. Just joined, what are these numbers? I'm gonna pin this. I'm just gonna pin a message. No ban list, must build. a deck 100 points or less. I can type Penny's comment.
I want to listen to Distraction Makers after this.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Good afternoon, Jank enthusiasts.
Change your point totals.
Good afternoon, Jank enthusiasts. I'm MBT, and this...
Oh, this is the guy you're talking.
Konami pulled an evil trick on me by waiting until I was done recording my video, then changing all the point totals in Genesis, making the entire video useless. I expect the same thing to happen this week, but in case it doesn't, we continue our exploration into Genesis format, with 3 decks with which I am sure you are not familiar. Presenting Genesis 2. But first, this video is sponsored by Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck.
I wouldn't say his face is punchable because that would involve wanting to touch his face with your fist, and I'm afraid to catch the beardless and the I don't want to catch whatever he has. No, thank you.
Despite what some Yu-Gi-Tubers who shall not be named would have you believe, the TCG is alive and well. And if you're looking to start your journey into paper, there's no better place to begin than Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck, with up-to-the-minute reporting to the video. Let's begin with Ice Barrier. This was an early contender for top Genesis deck, and it's not particularly hard to see why. This is a decent deck in the TCG with a grand total of 0 main deck hits and 1 3-point Trishula in the extra. This enables players to jam some really fantastic deck toolbox options and hand traps, including Psyframe Gamma and Grolan Lockbird. The mainline combo can pivot between Gimmer, Kragan, or Crocodragon draws, all alongside a Lancia for the floodgate of your choice and Trishula 0. So with that, let's get into the card by card. 3 Revealer, 3 Hexa, 3 Mirror Mage, 3 Georges, 2 Speaker, and a Raiho. Raiho is the floodgate that I like the most. It makes it really hard to play into an established board. Georges is already macro, so you don't need to beat a dead horse, but your mileage may vary. They do have something resembling an anti-spell and something resembling Scrubbed Raid if you want to get cute. We've got Ice Jade Ran Agrind in here too, which is a really independently powerful card. It's just Gimmer. After that, we've got 3 Gamciel, of course searchable off of our Ice Barrier, 3 Droll Lockbird, 3 Gamma and a Driver, double Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, 3 Medallion, a Freezing Chains, double Foolish Burial Goods for the Ice Barrier, but importantly, Ice Barrier's on field effect is still fine, and triple Book of Lunar Eclipse, which is the book that does not cost points. I do want to point out that you can really modulate a lot about this main deck. These are the hand traps I feel the most comfortable with, but you could honestly maybe even fit Ash in here if you want to get kooky. We've got a Fossil Warrior Skull Knight, Mirror Logic Aggregator, Kragan, and Kragan Spawn. We've got a Meilong, a White Aura Whale, Coral Dragon, Crocodragon, Trishula, Cheng-Ying, Gimmer, double Lancia, and a copy of Trishula Zero Dragon of the...
I need to get something to drink while this goes.
I think is at 79 points. So if you want to shave a card from the extra to play something like a Dragite, you can do that. But you can also just load up on good stuff. Regardless, let's see the deck in action. Our first match is up against Punk. A lot of people think Punk is going to be tier 1 in the upcoming Genesis game. It's not hard to see why. There are no hits to the main deck cards, which means you can splash for powerful extra deck bosses like Pep, and it loses to a bevy of boutique hand traps like Droll and Lockbird that people may not be splashing for. That said, I don't buy it. I think it's a little weak to breakers out of the board, but here it's game 1. They're going to begin with a copy of Xiamen. Grab a copy of Rising Scale, then read Gamma, this Foxy Tune. This is probably a little greedy. I'm just hoping they don't really have access to their synchro pool. They're going to go for the Rising Scale, and of course, Rising Scale can summon a Punk from deck. If they didn't have access to a 5, they could theoretically just get Deer Note here, but they go for Wagon, which is horrifying to me. And then I see the Roller Baller and realize this is Gold Pride Punk, and they are going to walk all over me. So here comes Dragon Drive and Sherrick Hussey. They're going to activate the Extreme Session in order to get that Sherrick Hussey out of their hand as they overlay for a Jam Fever. Then it's time to fusion into a Rising Carp. Now they draw off the Extreme Session, and it is Deer Note, which means they have to summon that from hand. That's funny, at least. Madam Spider is going to get them a Dangerous Gabu. They're going to set that, and then afterwards go for an Eradicator, a Deer Note, bring back the Sherrick Hussey, and pass. So this is Ghost Ogre and Quick, Amazing, and Fever. We'll begin with the Fever here, a Gamciel. We'll go Agrind next. They are going to Sherrick Hussey, so I can't get the Gims, and down comes Punk Amazing Dragon. This is not the worst in the world because of Revealer. They'll draw. Let's normal the Revealer. We'll activate the effect. They will Dangerous Gabu, but we've set Ice Barrier, which means we can use Ice Barrier to get a Georges and still kind of go off. We're going to go for the Georges afterwards. They're going to get the Dragon Drive first and enable follow-up plays, courtesy of Ziyaman. They'll draw a card in the process as well as we summon the Georges to our side of the field. We'll activate that effect. It gets Ghost Ogred, which is irritating, but also gets a Speaker. We'll go Stealth Kragan, and God, they are really close to dead, courtesy of their own life point drops, but just not close enough. They'll go to the main phase and activate the effect of Leon. We'll activate Stealth Kragan, do a 1350, but unfortunately this last 2k is going to be too much. Psychic End Punisher brings them down to 1,000 and brings me down to 0 as they go to the battle phase and pump this sucker up to a trillion. Next up is Archmage. You might be noticing a theme here. Like Ice Barrier, this is an archetype with 0 total hits. But unlike Ice Barrier, it's new, meaning its cards are very pushed. You can splash some supremely strong generics. Here, we are playing access to Illusilvia, Cartesia, and triple Super Polymerization. If you've never seen an Archmage play, well, get prepared. They are absolutely busted. We're playing 3 Medius the Pure, 2 Littera, 2 Graflair, and 1 Finmel, and of course our 2 copies of Power Patron to actually get the Fusion Ball rolling. We're playing 1 Cartesia, which just enables a lot. Not only does she add Sealing to your end board, she also enables you to play through stuff because of her quick effect Fusion Summon, and she is searchable off of Fusion deployments, as is Medius. Really, really flexible card here. We've got 3 copies of Alteration, 1 Succession. We've got 3 Assault and 3 Arcane Arts Acropolis. We're also playing the 1 Trap Awakening here just for pitching and shenanigans. And then, of course, we are in on Board Breakers, which are largely less points than Hand Traps, the Ultimate Slayers, the Super Polymerizations, the Fuwalos, the Droll and Lockbird, and the Cosmic Cyclone, of course, all of which we are afforded by our measly amount of points we have to invest into our main deck engine. Speaking of, we are playing Nerve, the Power Patron of Creation, Secretarion Dragon, Double Deoctorus, and then Maelong, Aggregator, Luluwa Lilith, Chorizo, Granguinol, Double Garura, Entis, our Azamina Illusilvia, which can be made with any illusion and any light spellcaster, a Dragostapelia, and a Mud Dragon of the Swamp. So with that, let's check out a game. Our second match is up against Dracotail. The first week of Genesis, people were basically just playing TCG Light, pointed up copies of Canine, Vanquish Soul, and Dracotail. I'm happy the points were adjusted so that that's no longer as possible, but you still can just jam Rahu. It's a crazy strong card. Unfortunately for our opponent, we've got crazy strong cards as well. Let's begin with Assault for Medius. Afterwards, we're going to normal summon the Medius and activate the effect. That is going to special summon a copy of Archmage Power Patron from our deck. That enables the fusion summon of our Diactorus. Of course, we'll trigger the Power Patron afterwards and go for fusion deployment to net a Cartesia revealing Grand Ginual. Let's set that field spell and then go to the Academy. We'll fire Alliteration to get a copy of Finmel. Finmel effect, summon herself to our side of the field. Then go for the Arts Acropolis in order to grab Littera. Littera is going to be summoned to our side of the field as well, cycling back a spell, which we will then pitch in order to grab a Graflair. We'll summon out that Graflair, and the whole squad is here. Let's set a copy of Succession, set a Cyclone, and pass back to our opponent. They're going to begin with a copy of King of the Swamp, netting them a Polymerization. They'll fire the Polymerization, and we will chain Cartesia. Why? Because we're playing Secretrion Dragon. Get owned. They'll go Lucius and Squamata here, setting a beast so they can draw a card and setting a copy of Ketu. They'll draw a card here, and then at point of resolution, we will Cosmic Cyclone the Ketu because I don't want to deal with it. Littera next will summon back this copy of Garaflair, and they will go for Dracotail, which will negate. Unfortunately, it negates activations, so they can fire off another Rahu Dracotail for a copy of Gulamel. We will go for the effect of Finmel in Chain as they set a Ketu, and we will go for Graflair afterwards in order to pop it. They'll pass turn here, and we will cycle back the Cartesia. Should just be a hop, skip, and a jump to lethal. Let's begin with this Littera back to our side of the field. Next, we will cycle the spell, activate Finmel's effect, and activate the effect of Succession. That'll make the one, the only Nerva, the Power Patron of Creation, as we shuffle our graveyard back and cycle the effect of Medius the Cure. From here, we can Medius in order to get the whole team back. A Power Patron, activate its effect in order to make a second copy of Diactorus into Power Patron into the Trap card. The Trap card can be pitched in order to grab a copy of Graflair, which we can summon to our side of the field, and we can set our Alliteration as well. Finally, we will normal our Blazing Cartesia and activate the Awakening Engrave in order to bounce both the Graflair and...
Japan's Sweet Jelly is staging the final stand of summer. From La Maison Shirokane in Tokyo, I grabbed their signature 4-piece set of double-layered fruit jelly. Not quite Blendy Pen color fusion, but guaranteed to leave sticky juice all over your hands and cutting board. First, pineapple jelly and slices on top with sweet fizzy citrus ramune beneath. Bright, tropical, and juicy, and if eating jelly with a wooden spoon is wrong, I don't want to be right. Japan loves pairing grape with grape. Double juicy muscat on top for a tart floral sweetness. Dig down into grape that feels less harrowing than jelly blobs of doom, but still gives me a slightly tart artificial purple special. Next, apple over mango. Crisp apple slices up top. I'm left feeling nostalgic for applesauce and happy to see a thick mango. Here juicier and jellier with a side of brain rot. Peach over strawberry with a peach slice suspended mid-jelly with a burst of juiciness. Compared to the sweet peach jelly on top, the strawberry on bottom was so faint it felt about as tacked on as a few members of Glenn's party. Though the sweet and sour combo eventually redeems itself enough for a lineup I'll probably end up craving next year. The band Sweet Jelly is staging the final stand of summer.
Hey, you know what time it is?
I don't know. 10 minutes to 10?
I think it's time to...
Structure Maker.
So, huge announcement from Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah.
They launched a whole new format that looks interesting.
We were on a different corner of the TCG interwebs this week.
It bears resemblance to a Magic format, some people might know, called Canadian Highlander, where it has point totals assigned to cards, and then you have a point total. It has points assigned to cards, and then you have a point total for the number of points that you can have in your deck. We'll explain that a little more thoroughly later. But I thought, we could sit down, we can explain kind of what this new system is, and then also, what Magic might be able to learn from this if this format is successful.
Before we get too far into talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis, if you're new to the channel, so the lens that we talk about games is usually through the lens of game design, as opposed to high-end meta details. So we're not as familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta and what's happening, we're not as familiar with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Mechanics, but we look at everything through the systems of the game itself.
So why don't we walk through what the new format is?
So there's three major things that make up the Genesis format. The first thing is that Link and Pendulum monsters are now banned. They are not allowed in this format.
As a Magic player, I don't understand what a Link summon is. I don't understand what a Pendulum summon is. So why don't we go ahead and explain it in a way that a Magic player could understand? So what is a Link summon?
I believe a Link monster has different triangles on its outer frame that is equal to its Link number, extra deck space.
Makes perfect sense. Why'd they ban that?
I don't know.
So what's a Pendulum summon do?
So Pendulum summon...
All right, so all you need to know is that those two things are banned. Who cares? So the more interesting thing to discuss here, I think, is the point totals. So each deck can have, apparently their default is 100 points for a deck, and then there's a list of cards that have different point totals based on sort of their power level in previous metas and trying to balance out things that have been way too powerful in the past.
And then the only other last remaining thing is that there's a new forbidden and limited list that is used for this. So it's not using the same traditional one. Forbidden list is their ban list.
Which sounds way cooler.
Oh, it's way cooler.
That's just the thing that Magic can learn, is that they should name their ban list the forbidden list.
I mean, really, Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point is pretty much all flavor for me. So not the cards. The cards, I don't understand the flavor at all. But looks and appeal,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The vibes.
The vibes.
Let's talk about the, I guess, sort of pros and cons of using a point system like this generally. And in this way, we can kind of relate it to Canadian Highlander in that this is a particularly, I think, a good system for Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically, because Yu-Gi-Oh! Has had problems in the past with what is known as the queen problem, which means that in a deck or in a game that has customizable pieces, why would you not just choose to play all queens if you could? And there was no resistance to playing the best cards in the game. They do limit you to 3 copies of an individual card per deck. It's a 40-card deck, right?
Yes.
3 copies, 40 card. However, they don't really have mana in the same way that Magic does. There's
they don't have color lock.
There's no color locking. They don't really have mana. They have like a 1 summon per turn, but even that gets subverted a lot, and it's a little fuzzy. But in this way, this allows them to somewhat solve the queen problem outside of the game itself. So in deck building, we are adding in an additional layer of restriction.
So a quick, easy way of explaining the queen problem, if you happen to be a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player that's watching this, is that back in the day, there's nothing stopping you from just playing 3 Gemini Elves when Gemini Elf was the best normal summon monster to play, right? In Magic, though, it would usually be locked behind some sort of a color. So if you have a highest attack, maybe only red can play highest attack creatures.
Or higher mana costs.
Right.
Those kinds of things. Right.
So I think the other pro is that right now this is going to build technically more deck diversity. I don't think this has ever been a huge issue with Yu-Gi-Oh, especially recently. I'm not as familiar with the metas, but it does sound like there's a lot of different potential viable archetypes.
Currently, from the sounds of it, all those cards that were good, if they have a point allocated to them, you might not be able to play as many copies as you might want to in deck because they're worth too many points. So if you only have a 100-point budget to spend, some cards have 50 points on them, some have 1 point, there's some that have 1 point, some have 30 points. There's a big spectrum that the designers can use to sort of like guide certain cards within deck building.
Now, inevitably, like any sort of a game, this is going to be optimized. There's going to become a meta, and it's going to just exist, right? Players will figure out what the most optimal decks are. But this is going to be very fresh in comparison to what Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been playing with, especially, I think, removing Link and Pendulum Monsters knocks out a whole section of Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks that just aren't going to be even playable at this point. But what's going to be interesting to see is that because they can update the system, that they can continuously kind of keep the meta fresh if they like, depending on how drastically they update it.
Right, which, basically is like another pro to the system, is that it can be updated as needed. And it also means that you have a spectrum of how you can affect the card. You don't have to go from it's playable or it's banned. There's a variety of point totals you can add to cards that mean that they're less and less playable in a deck. You can go from 1 point all the way to 100 points for a card. So if you wanted to play one copy of that card, it's going to cost you all 100 points, which probably effectively means it's banned, but it's not technically banned.
The other thing I think is really, really interesting, and that I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually needed really badly, is that because this is now a new format, official format for Yu-Gi-Oh! That's not just blocked by like Time, like GOAT or Edison formats, which is equivalent of like something like Modern. What's interesting with that is that now the designers can actually plan out cards with different format power levels in mind. Meaning that if Link monsters or Pendulum monsters are put into newer sets that come out, they can effectively understand and know ahead of time that's not going to be part of this other format's meta, so we don't even need to consider what's happening in that meta when designing for these archetypes now.
That's actually really interesting because it does give you a way to balance cards in different formats, which I think would be great for Magic in terms of like, okay, well, this card in the Legacy format is worth a lot more points than it would be in... No, other way around. This card in Modern is worth a lot more points than it would be in Legacy or something because the power level of Legacy overall is much higher. It's interesting. It's more complexity, but it's interesting. The other pro here is that, yeah, these are, when in comparison to, say, the bracket system for Commander, these are much more explicit rules, right? It's that you look at a point list and you can see immediately, okay, I have too many points in my deck, I have not enough points in my deck, I can add a few more things or whatever to bring myself back up in power level theoretically with other decks that are operating at my same point total, rather than being like, well, I'm at bracket 3, but I'm playing, one game changer. Do I remove that game changer or do I add in 2 more? And also, like, how well are the game changers balanced against each other, right? So like one game changer might be much more powerful than another, but they're both just game changers. There's no gradient to that power level. Okay, so any system has positives and negatives. So we've talked about the positives. Let's talk about some of the negatives with the system.
Right. I spent a lot of the last couple days watching Yu-Gi-Oh! YouTubers, and it seems like a lot of enfranchised players are not concerned by this, but you and I seem pretty concerned by this, which is complexity. It's a very complex system, and even more so than Canadian Highlander. Canadian Highlander, I think the list is significantly smaller, and I believe it usually scales from it's 1 to 15.
I think it's 10. It's 10 points for a deck instead of 100.
There's a lot less versatility in that. And again, it's that's great for super enfranchised theory crafters, right, that want to get in there and start exploring and making decks, which is fantastic. But yeah, it's a lot to consider.
Yeah, and really it's adding in, like you said, a whole other layer to deck building, right? So we are solving the queen problem in a new way. When you're going to put your deck together, we're saying, hey, you can't necessarily play these 2 queens together. They can be played separately, but not together, or whatever, right? but because of that, there's an upkeep to this, right? There's a this will be updated. Players will need to be on top of it. So it works well, I think, for enfranchised players, like you're saying, very competitive players. But it doesn't work as well for a more casual audience, probably, which I think is why Commander is using this bracket system instead of a point system.
And I think that this is actually especially complex for a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! Because when it comes to other TCGs on the market, if we look at like the main three of Pokemon, Magic, and Yu-Gi-Oh!, right? Magic and Pokemon kind of have this sort of collector space for them to get certain players interested. Magic also has multiple formats, right? So you can have cards that are designed with modern intentions, Commander, Standard, Limited, etc. And a pack is going to be made up of a lot of those different cards with those different use cases. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Hasn't had these other formats, and I don't think has quite as much of a collector culture. And so really the way to, I think, entice players is you have to make those cards good. Now, again, I'm not familiar with current Yu-Gi-Oh! Sets, so I don't know. There could just be a lot of what Pokemon does, which is, it's just a lot of, I guess, like, chaff that's just in the packs. That's sort of acting as fluff or flavor. But if that's not the case, then I'd imagine the selling point for most of those sets is that you have to make cards that are viable in either a brand new archetype or existing archetypes in order to sell that set, meaning there's even more cards that players have to know about and understand. Whereas, if we use, Magic's newest Spider-Man set coming out, people have been talking about, like, the 4 cards or something that might be relevant. And it's like, yeah, in your one format, you might only need to know these 4 cards or something, because that's all that's relevant for you to play.
Another potential con is more on the designer side of things, where because you now have a gradient somewhere between banned and unbanned, playable and banned, I guess, you might be more risk averse when you go to like make a decision about something that needs to be addressed in a format, and instead you might creep into the point totals and say, okay, well there's a problematic card, let's add some points to it and see if that works. Let's wait a little while, let's add some more points to it, see if that works, when the card should just be banned. Now, I think you're more likely to take action generally and do something if you're seeing a problem emerging, but I do think that there might be a delay in taking extreme action where when that is your only option is banned or unbanned, you're more likely to sort of eliminate the problem, potentially. So you might end up with you might end up with a problematic card that continues to be a problem, even though you've put points on it.
I also think to add to that a little bit, because I do think the decisiveness is just cleaner, right? I think it should be as helpful as possible to remove any unnecessary information, right? So, for instance, the card Catapult Turtle is a classic combo card from like very old meta back in the day, is 100 points. And that's essentially them saying, don't play Catapult Turtle. So, like, at that point, could you just not have it on the list and say it's banned, right? Is that not just a simpler way in order to make sure that the list itself is a little bit cleaner?
Well, it's not technically banned, so if something else combos with it that isn't on the list yet and you figure it out, you get to be a genius for a minute before that other thing gets points put on it.
That's true. Speaking of Magical Scientist, is 95 points, so there's 5 points for you to combo off Magical Scientist.
There you go.
And then the final thing is that this is super risky of them doing this. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is all in on this. They have announced this format and also announced that it is going to be officially having official sanctioned tournaments at local game stores.
Full send on this one, which honestly I think is admirable, right? They're basically saying, look, we've got this idea for this new thing, we're going to give it the best shot it can to succeed.
I think the worst case scenario is you're going to get people that already play the game, that already have a lot of these cards, to just go and play this other format and try it out. Best case scenario, you increase the player base from people that maybe, fell off a little while ago, or they didn't like the idea of linking pendulum monsters, and that just got into, crept into too high of complexity for them, and they kind of want to go back to those old school metas. You have this new format available to them that's not just the Edison or Goat format again. So, yeah, I think it's risky, but it's risky, I'd say, for a game like Magic to suddenly do this, right? Where they have all of these different formats, and they come out with all these different formats all the time. But for Yu-Gi-Oh! To kind of do this for the first time and really go all in on it, yeah, I think it's probably good. I think I wouldn't be surprised if this is a success for them.
Okay, so let's move into takeaways. What do we think, Magic can learn from this? I think that's kind of the theme for the video here. So, one, I think there's sort of some pros and cons for, at least in the Commander sphere, for CEDH to adapt this and take on some kind of a point total system. It's more likely that would need to be managed by the community because it doesn't seem like Wizards of the Coast is all that interested in managing the CEDH format. But this could be a way to sort of solve some of this queen problem stuff for CEDH.
Each partner is 51 points.
You can only play one partner.
Yeah. They're not banned.
But you can't play them together anymore. Yeah.
Kinnon's 101 points.
So Kinnon is banned.
It's funny because these types of systems are going to be more utilized by the players that are heavily invested. Right. So it's going to be harder to be approachable. But if you're concerned at a certain point as a company or as you're developing a format for a game is not to get more players, but to sort of hone in on the actual format itself and make sure that it has a healthier meta or that you need to shake things up in some way, that I don't think starting to figure a system out like this or use a system like this is a bad place to start.
I have another con. And this might be a con for Magic as well. This is difficult to enforce at a Friday Night Magic level. Is that it's pretty it's pretty tough for you to sort of observe what your opponent is doing and then make sure that they don't have too many points in their deck. If they're just sort of playing, whatever, and you're I'm counting the points up as you're playing your cards, and I'm the one who's sort of having to police the situation. Now, if it's an event where you register a deck, that's a different story. But, yeah, I mean...
No, I think that's totally fair, and I do think that you do have to, you register your deck, but I think those lists are going to be a lot longer then, right, and have a lot more small differences in numbers compared to even something like Canadian Highlander.
Yeah, and the thing that got me thinking about it was I was, thinking about whether or not this would be a good fit for the standard format because of all the sort of issues that's having right now that you would maybe think, okay, this could be cool to apply to standard to help smooth out some of these ban problems. We can act sooner on something like Vivi and Cauldron, where we can make sure that they can't be played in the same deck together, but they can be played in separate decks, and then see if they're still problematic in the format. We can then see which one of them might be more problematic before we take any kind of a ban action. But then I'm like, okay, but wait, because we have sort of hyper competitive standard at the peak, and then we have a bunch of casual standard below that, and you get sort of less and less ability to sort of police the format with the systems outside of just the players themselves as you go down further into casual.
I suppose it depends on if Wizards would care about policing that, right? In a Friday Night Magic sense, that might be awkward, but in a tournament sense, right, as long as the point system isn't too robust, and I do think Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis right now is leaning towards, in my opinion, a little too robust. But I think when you have a robust one, it's a lot harder to track, like you're saying. But if there's very few cards, or there's easier shorthands, right, everything is a certain amount of points, and so you have to have a certain total for your deck or something like that, right? Then that makes it a little bit easier for you to sort of calculate and track.
The other thing that's interesting is this could be a lot easier to navigate in a digital environment, right? Something like Arena.
I don't know why more digital games aren't doing this.
There's something interesting about this, though, is that in a digital setting, you can just patch the cards, right? So, you wouldn't necessarily need to do this point total thing. I could actually see a system like this that operates in real time in a digital environment being really interesting, that as as decks or cards are winning, the system itself points them for you, so you don't really have to touch it as a designer.
Oh, sure.
Or as a developer.
It just naturally grows based off win percentage.
And the format fluctuates because of that. But
that sounds like something Richard Garfield would do in a game.
Maybe.
Honestly. Yeah.
And players, would have to know that that's the experience that they're in for. So their deck, as they're playing it, can get too many points. They play one game, they get out of that match, and suddenly they can't play their deck anymore because the points have changed.
Yeah, that is funny. It would have to probably be some sort of a weekly reset.
It could be a weekly, almost a seasonal type.
It's funny
things
because that's
that-
sort of like a half step to what Flesh and Blood does, right? Where Flesh and Blood is if a card is used and wins too many times in a tournament, then it gets retired.
It goes
yeah.
in the Hall of Fame or something.
Like that. Yeah. So this is just that, but every week it's slightly getting stronger and stronger.
Well, and then also like as things get less played, they would be reduced in points potentially.
Yeah, what the hell? Why aren't people doing this? Richie, get on that. You got the resources and the manpower. Or we'll cut this. And then
Does he? We'll just cut this whole idea, and this is going in our pocket.
Yeah, what the hell?
Put that in my pocket for later.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think overall system's cool. I'm excited to see what happens in the Yu-Gi-Oh sphere. Is that what it's called? Where you fight?
Are you excited to see what happens?
You fight in the sphere?
No.
Where do you fight?
You fight on motorcycles.
Is this true?
If you enjoyed listening to us talk about Yu-Gi-Oh and want us to talk more about Yu-Gi-Oh, please feel free to give a little like and a subscribe, maybe a comment down below.
If you would like us to never talk about Yu-Gi-Oh again, you can join our Discord. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
think I'm going to end it here.